Hello, baby. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Sound Direction, a menswear podcast. Can you believe it or not, Ripley? There's no stuffiness here.
There's no
I used to say
stuffiness?
that. I used to say that a long time ago, and I don't
Ripley?
remember anymore. Yeah.
Um,
Do you remember the SNL sketch, Laser Cats?
I do not.
and,
wait.
yeah,
What was describe it to me? Maybe I remember it.
Well, okay, so it's got
I can think of two things that it probably has in it.
Oh, what do you? Yeah,
Lasers and cats. Yeah.
Your mind didn't automatically go to Andy Samberg and Bill Hader. Anyway, like they make videos, and it's usually like cats are the guns, and they shoot lasers.
Oh, okay. I think I remember this.
Yeah, but
How did we
each
get on
one
this?
is like a parody. Well, because there was a scene that Sigourney, I think it's Sigourney Weaver, and it was a Avatar episode, but then the parody of that whole episode, or the whole short, was them doing like aliens.
Okay.
And then at the end, like Ripley saves their ass with like a fucking I guess a flamethrower cat. I mean flames are kind of like a laser, but like a laser's little brother,
I don't think
kind of.
flames are like a laser. I don't think any scientist would say
they
that.
both have light, right?
Sure.
Is that what? Like how after we get a literal PhD
Laser
on the
stands for
podcast-
something, you know? Laser stands for something.
Yeah, it's like light
I'll tell you what laser stands
amplified.
for.
Wait, I can do it. It's light
I don't believe you.
amplified server electronic radio.
By simulated emission of radiation.
Well, I got
This is an educational podcast. I know we just changed the category on iTunes, but we deep down we're an educational podcast.
I'm gonna finish that bit real quick here.
Okay.
So when Sigourney Weaver's character jumps in to save them, they go Ripley, and she goes, "Believe it or not," and that has always stuck with me ever since.
Have you ever been to the museums?
Absolutely. I
Okay.
have.
What's your favorite thing they got there? The big tall guy.
Don't we to tell you?
The big fat guy.
You mean the last
Yeah.
time I went there when I
Sure.
was like in like high school?
Yeah, tell me.
Dude, I don't want to know. I wanted to like kiss my crush or something, man. I was like, "Whoa, is this? Aren't the ladies' fingernails so long?"
One time.
By the way, kiss me.
One time
Yeah.
I went to I don't remember which location it was, but I went to one and they had a stone. It was like a little gemstone. It was holographic, so you couldn't actually touch it, but it was like it looked like you could, and it was like, "This is cursed, and if you try to grab it, you'll be cursed for the rest of your life." And then you try to grab it, and then it whooshes away in mist, and then an evil voice cackles or something. And I did that, and I was like, "Oh my god, I've been cursed." I was like legit like scared. I was like,
You're like Barbosa at the end of
I was
not at the end, but
I was
before.
like, I went through the rest of the museum, and I was like, dead man walking. I'm cursed. I'm not gonna make it out. But I made it to this day. It's a medical miracle. Doctors don't know how it happened, but
I mean, there was that one time where we were hanging out and we said let's make sandwiches, and then you gave me like, "Oh, Ethan, you can finish off this loaf of bread," and apparently I was the only one who got moldy bread. And
Yes, that is
the
right.
whole day. I was like halfway done with the sandwich when I'm like, "Oh shit, there's mold on here." Thanks, by the way. But like after that, I was like, "Oh man." Like dead man walking, aka I'm gonna throw up or poop or something, man. Like I was so scared the rest
I
of the
mean,
day.
you're always gonna poop. You're never like if you're
You
a
never
real
know.
dead
I
man
mean,
walking if
there
you're not
could be
gonna poop.
I mean, there are definitely times where when you go eat something and you're like, "Oh man, I'm gonna like I know I'm gonna like it's gonna happen," like, and you're like I gotta like. You're a dead man walking, dude. Like you don't know what's gonna happen.
We're gonna make that our slogan now. That's when you know you have to poop. You're a dead man walking.
I mean, Spencer, don't be insensitive. People died of dysentery for millions, thousands of years.
No, I think billions of years.
Okay, 60. By the way, not to go too far off topic, I did go on another deep dive of Jurassic World Dominion, but maybe that's.
I'd rather go off topic than keep talking about poop.
I mean, as those of you who have listened to our bonus episode, you'll know how much we dislike that.
Yeah.
No, I just I was reading a guy on Reddit. No, this is like a regular white guy podcast. Like, yeah, you know what I saw on Reddit recently? And we're speaking of white guys, we'll get to our guest in a second.
Yeah.
I guess not. I guess Anyway, I'm not
What?
gonna debate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was like a like stream of consciousness thread of a guy on Reddit, and he's like, I'm gonna watch the extended version of Jurassic World Dominion and post all my thoughts, and then just press enter. And it's fucking. You didn't watch Jurassic World Dominion, right, Spencer?
No, of course not.
Okay, yeah. It's not good.
No.
There's like a flashback in the beginning. It's basically the beginning is like the T-Rex in its previous life gets into a fight with another dinosaur. T-Rex dies, and then a mosquito gets the gets the blood from that T-Rex,
Okay.
and then it's implied that that's the T-Rex that we all know and love, Rexy. And at the
I do
end of
love
the
that
movie, it fights that same dinosaur, and it wins because it's fucking Jurassic World. And it's like, wait a minute, it's like a second life, kind of like it died,
Oh,
and
Second
then
Life?
at that moment, yeah,
Video game?
exactly, and it came
Okay.
back, and now it's the king of the dinosaurs, T-Rex. Yeah, that movie's fucking crazy. There's a guy that looks like Tim Cook in there. I think I told Spencer that. I'm pretty sure I said that when I immediately after I watched it.
Well, because he's out there and he's like, the new iPhone has more features than ever before.
There's a scene where he fires Dr. Malcolm, and it's the cringiest thing I've ever seen. He's like, "You're fired, Ian. You get that? You're fired." I'm like, "What the fuck is this movie, dude?"
Yeah.
There's also a scene where the helicopter person says, "Someone's grab on." No, I think it's like, "Everyone grab onto somebody," and it's like, what? Like, it's like a fucking like Disney Channel helicopter pilot. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, who would
like,
tell someone to grab onto somebody?
Yeah, I mean, okay, I couldn't think of the lyric from
grabber?
that, but yeah, grabber.
Yeah.
Anyway, not speaking of grabbing, I want to say speaking of the movie industry and acting and lights, camera,
Jackson.
Peter Jackson. I made Lord of the Rings. I don't know why I'm making him sound like what's his name? Who's our favorite Maori? The guy.
Taika
Fucking-
Waititi. He doesn't
Yeah,
even
that's
sound
him.
like that, though.
What do you mean? That's exactly what he sounds like.
Okay, whatever.
Hey man, we got a new guest. I guess I'll get. No, that's not true. Some guests have come back. That's right. And maybe Doug will come back to the future in the future sometime. But
You're extending this way too long.
Yeah, give it up for Douglas.
Doug Douglas.
Have me, boys.
Welcome.
Welcome.
I wish we had a chance to catch up before the podcast, but we ran into technical issues, so we're doing it now.
I wouldn't say it's issues. It was like we were creating a whole
Oh, we're
new
creators?
area.
We're
Yeah.
issue creators. I'm gonna put that on
Yeah.
my resume.
We're the problem solvers.
Yeah.
Welcome, Doug. You're a longtime friend of ours.
And first time guest of ours. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Were we friends before the podcast, or was that like?
Oh man, I don't know.
It has to be
Probably.
after
Yes.
it. No, it
yes.
no, I don't think so.
No, I think it was after. I think that was maybe when the podcast was like dormant or something.
I
Dormant.
believe it was the dormancy period.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. We went like a couple months without an episode.
Okay. Sure, Mr. History over here.
I was a
Um,
history major at one point.
Yeah. Well, Doug, I
I
mean,
the log.
Yeah. I was a podcast historian.
yeah, a P-log.
P-log.
Hey,
need to
it's a P-log blitz. Anyway, yeah, Doug's been, for those of you who don't know, Doug's been a friend of ours for at least like 5 years at this point. You know, I
Yeah.
keep thinking the blog's 5 years old, but it's actually like 8 years old, which is crazy.
Man. It's a damn
and-
kid.
That's right. I was a damn old kid. But yeah, you guys might have seen Doug, you know, not snooping around, but just hanging around some old blog posts. You know, he was there when we hung out with the Gooch brothers. I think, I'm not sure if, no, we didn't go to the Rose Bowl together. Like, I had gone to the Rose Bowl, like, before you had.
I think the
before you were
first time we
friends.
met was at the Rose Bowl, though.
Yeah, you and
Yeah.
Spencer. Yeah. And I remember that because I think I was texting Doug. I'm like, hey, I'm gonna meet up with you, and I go, I'm with Garrett, and then he goes, well, I'm next to Garrett, and I'm like, well, I don't see you, and it turns out that Garrett Gooch is not the same proprietor as Garrett.
He's a different guy.
What's his last name?
Garrett Miller.
Garrett Miller
Miller.
of Western Gifts. Shout out Western Gifts over there in Highland Park.
Yeah, great store.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, Doug's been around a lot. You know, he's taught us a lot about
Oh,
vintage
yeah.
milsurp and workwear, and I guess, as we'll get into later, how to be sexy and cool while wearing it. I mean,
Yeah,
that might be a thing that we didn't have before.
Yeah, you were meeting you like that was in a weird period where I was like I was tired of wearing like vintage dandy clothes. I was tired of looking like a 1940s like catalog advertisement, and I tried doing like Drake's and Ivy, and I'm like, I don't know, I don't quite like this. And then I was like,
this might be the first time you've admitted that actually right now.
I don't know. I feel like I've talked about that before, and then we started hanging out, and then I'm like, damn, vintage can actually look cool. You just don't have to get like, you just can't buy like fucking Tattersall and like whatever, and like a bunch of broad-shouldered bold stuff. So yeah,
Definitely steer clear of the Tattersall.
It's hey, first off, Tattersall's great, and number two, I still look like I dress. I think I've gone back to dressing like a 1940s catalog ad now. So it's like, it can still be cool, guys. I don't want to. I know I'm outnumbered here as a guy who wears a tie, but I still want to make sure the tie guys are still well represented here.
Tie guys.
No, that's okay. You and Spencer have like a magnetism dance. Like Spencer pulls one way and you have to push in, and then it's like an opposite. It's an opposite.
It's like the
momentum.
Odd Couple.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, it's a two friends, odd couple, C-3PO, R2-D2. We had this. Spencer had this conversation. We were at a bar and we saw a photo of a tall man and a shorter guy, and we're like, "Hey, that's C-3PO."
Classic comedy trio. Yeah. Who's the third person? Wait, who is the third person between R2-D2 and C-3PO? If you had to include a third person, who would it be?
It's BB-8, dude. It's
BB-8. Yeah.
Come on, I guess
I forgot about Baldroid.
Yeah, I gotta roll out of here. Yeah, Doug, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, so for people who don't know you, people who want to know you more as, hey, look, there's that guy Ethan tags, which could describe literally anyone who's not me in my canon of friends.
Yeah, sadly, I'm not Young Chomsky. I think that's the biggest heartbreak to everyone, is that they're always disappointed that I'm not Young Chomsky. But I feel like everyone you tag that isn't Young Chomsky, they want to be Young Chomsky or ask for more of him. We met when I was looking for a tailor, and I was living in where I still live in La Cañada, and I was looking for a tailor in the area. Mm-hmm. Found your blog, and you had recommended our tailor, and I had DM'd you on Instagram about it and asked about your experience with Noi, and you raved about him. And then I believe Rose Bowl was that weekend, and that was the first time we met up. At that time, I was finishing up at UCLA. I double majored in psych and philosophy, and was acting, and then have maintained a steady diet of acting since leaving UCLA, and that's what I do professionally, and lucky to call that a job, but I have lots of interests outside of just that. So lots to keep me busy.
Name two of those interests.
Yeah, name two interests if you have so damn many.
I would say the first two that would come to mind would definitely be interior design and clothes.
There you go. I mean, hey, if you follow Doug, and you can call him Douglas. Well, that's not. It's you can call me Douglas, but I'm not you, so I can't say that.
Yeah,
it's okay.
We don't approve of identity theft here.
Yeah, it's a crime.
But yeah, if you follow Doug, you'll see that he has a very well curated, images of great clothing, interior design, both from him and other stuff that he finds across the internet.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's really cool. You guys should give him a follow. I remember that time when we hung out. We were like, oh yeah, I went to the tailor. Like, let's go grab like coffee. And at that time, I didn't even drink coffee. I think I got like a lemonade at that time at Float. Shout out Float, one of my favorite cafes. I wish they were open later, but it's a cool spot. And yeah, you were there, and I remember you were wearing. I know you were wearing your stay press. I'm pretty sure you were wearing them that day. I just don't know if you were wearing like a short sleeve OCBD or if it was like a sports shirt that was like short sleeve as well. One of those two things. And I think you had your shell cordovan. What were
penny
they?
Loafers.
Yeah, penny loafers.
Yeah, shell penny loafers with the stay press and a 1960s seersucker Brooks Brothers half sleeve.
Yeah, there you go. Short sleeve shirts. I don't wear them as much.
I'm wearing one right now.
Well, I'm wearing a t-shirt. I guess I mean, I guess it's, that's technically a short sleeve. But Doug, okay, so, acting, philosophy, interior design, how did that all start for you? And like paying attention to aesthetics, I'm assuming it's like just for most of the people we have on here, it's just about like, paying attention to details and finding out what excites you. So what set you on that path?
So I grew up around it. I don't have anyone in my family that's in any of those industries, but my entire family is purveyors and large appreciators of aesthetics of all sorts. So my grandfather was quite rakish. He was, quite a dandy in his day, loved dress. He owned over, I think, 120 different cars. His big loves were clothes and automobiles. So, there's photos of me growing up washing, I think, like 20 different cars all through my life that I got to see. And like I said, he was quite a well-dressed man. And then as for my mom, my grandfather grew up in the heydays of American mid-century design. So his home was he lived in an Eichler, and his house was always decorated in, the finest of American mid-century. And as a result of that, my mom really kind of pushed away and had a real hesitancy towards that. And she and an ex-husband of hers had a home in Santa Fe. And I think she really felt drawn to the Southwest and more primitive furnitures and things that you would find more out of like a Ralph Lauren catalog. And so growing up, it was a lot of, Johnson trips to flea markets, anywhere we would travel to. That's one of the first things that my mom always taught me was like the best way to get to know a new city or a new culture is to go to a flea market and see what people have and get to know people through bartering and haggling and all of that. So plenty of that. She was an entertainment reporter growing up my whole life. So lots of trips to museums and opera and all sorts of arts and culture. And I believe that kind of informs all of it. Like it's all inclusive. It all folds into one.
Yeah, my mom is very similar to that. I mean, my mom is, for those of you who have met my mom, she definitely aspires to be like, very cultured and maybe kind of like waspy person. I think she actually had an original copy of the official preppy handbook from the 80s or whatever. Like she when she was like a teenager or I mean maybe starting college, she like got it and she loved it. And I don't know where it is. I think she gave it to me and I just lost it or something, which sucks.
How dare you?
Which is, it's out of print, right? But yeah, I mean, she's kind of been the same way. Like I remember as a kid, like she would take us to plays, take us to operas, listen to classical music. I mean, like, Pavarotti was still alive during that time. I mean, I think he only died like 5 years ago. I guess it's not like he's long gone, but like three tenors. I remember my dad was talking about that shit and everything. So I'm not surprised that, when you have parents like this, whether they're into fashion or not, it's like, it teaches you to pay attention to things.
Yeah, I guess my mom also did that. Like she always took us to like we
did
like summer concert. Yeah, summer concerts at like the Hollywood Bowl and stuff like that.
Yep.
She was also, I mean, she wasn't like into the same clothes that I am, but she was also the only person in my family basically that was into clothes. And I think she did teach me about where to shop for vintage. Because she taught me about Melrose, at least. Melrose Avenue.
Oh, yeah, my mom didn't do that. My mom was like Bloomingdale's only kind of a thing, But that could be an Asian American thing where, like, you don't buy old stuff, you buy new. But that's, maybe we'll revisit the cultural connotations of being Asian in a future episode. So, like, Doug, when did it get really erupt for you, Like, did you always, like, when you were, like, in high school or college, did you wear, like, OCVDs and jeans and Clark's Desert Boots and stuff like that? Or
yeah, were you the MFA basic bastard? At any point in your life?
You kind of do that now. I mean, you wear like white t-shirts and jeans now. It's kind of, I mean, even if you don't follow the MFA Basic Bastard, it is still built on that like basic stuff and repeatable, which we'll get into. But yeah, when did it start for you where you're like, okay, I'm gonna develop my own style, this is what I like, Americana, etc.?
Certainly. I definitely was not. I wish I was wearing this kind of shit back then. I was not.
Yeah, you and me both, brother. I'd be swimming in Tang.
I like to pause before you said that. The hesitancy.
I have to pick the right word for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was not. I was I was actually wearing when I was 14 and 15, everything that's popular now, which is crazy. Like I have a box full of Chrome Hearts
Oh
at my
man.
Oh,
mom's
wow,
house,
okay.
still waiting for my future teenage child to like bust out. But that was back in the day when like you could go to Chrome Hearts and you could go to the store on Robertson and go in and like for $30 or $40 you got a t-shirt, and for $80 you got a sweatshirt. And I think the caps were like $65 or something, and that was super affordable back then. Like $35 for a t-shirt was great. And I had a friend named Johnny who his dad was in the clothing business, was in the schmata business, and he was like Mr. Chrome Hearts back then. Like ever since he was like could walk, he was always in Chrome Hearts. And I think that kind of just permeated out through our friend group.
Okay.
And especially growing up in Texas, but having been born here and having kind of
Yeah.
spent so much time back and forth, it was one of those things where there's definitely a uniform in Texas, right? Like everybody wears the same Stonewash Wrangler jeans, like Lucchese or Laredo cowboy boots, brown always, never black, which is like so weird to me. Always brown, and like a nasty color, like a nasty shade of brown. And then like one of those like SPF shirts that you get at like REI or like Bass
Yeah.
Pros.
Mm-hmm.
And that's typically the uniform. And so I think as a result of growing up around that, I never wanted to look like that. So it was definitely a lot of trying out things. That was also like back in like the heyday of Barney's, and there was Barney's outlets near me. And so like it was a lot of, I was lucky that like, I certainly didn't grow up with means. Like we definitely did not grow up with money. If you know me and you know my story, you know that very intimately. But like I did grow up with a mom who fucking loved to shop. So, and I had jobs ever since I was a kid, and that was kind of what I was always using my money on. Was I really loved clothes, and I loved the expression and the utility of it. And I was always trying to just find new things and new ways to wear them.
Do you remember what your first like purchase was, where you're like, oh, this is like cool, like this is the coolest thing I've ever bought?
I mean, I feel like it was definitely the first Chrome Hearts t-shirt I ever got.
Yeah.
And it was a white one that had Chrome Hearts on the collar. And I was like 14 years old. And I definitely thought, to quote our good friend Ethan, I was like going to be drowning in town. And I definitely was not. But everyone, when I went back to Texas, thought I was such a loser. They were like, why is your shirt covered in Old English writing? It looks so stupid. And I was like, no, guys, it's cool. I promise.
This is the coolest thing.
I'm not that aware of Chrome Hearts, until like recently when all the fucking kids are like getting back into it. But I must have bought like some shirt randomly that had, of course, was like taking after that. But I had no idea until like recently. I'm like, oh, that's what that shirt back then was trying to do,
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I owned anything in the like Y2K period that would have been a cool thing now. My favorite t-shirt back then was a t-shirt that had like Frankenstein on it, and it said like Frankenstein's Monster Company or something like that.
I mean,
that was my favorite shirt.
I mean, I've talked about the gas mask shirt that I tried to wear. I had an Ed Hardy t-shirt, which could actually kind of go hard because it's like a skull with like a top hat and like
Okay.
fucking like, what do you call it? Like poker cards around it and shit.
Yeah.
But hey, my Star
Y2K
Wars t-shirts,
king.
or the picture of my cock t-shirt, which it's like a cartoon chicken, but it's like, here's a photo of my cock. Got that in Hawaii of all places.
Nice, of all places.
But Doug, when did like Americana, like when did like whether it's vintage or not, when did that start to get in there? OCBDs, selvedge denim, etc.
I think for me, because I grew up I went to an international baccalaureate school growing up from
IB.
from fifth IB baby
Yes.
from fifth grade on. So we had to wear uniforms. So we were in OCBDs, gray slacks, black dress shoes, which I sometimes got away with black Timberlands to try to edge it out a little bit.
Nice.
And then
There
you could wear a polo on Fridays. But so because of that, I never really wanted to wear that on my off days because it just felt like I was wearing my school uniform. Like, oh, what am I just going to swap it out for some chinos? So really all of that started coming into play later. It was when I was 19. My little brother and I had moved across the country back to California. It was just the two of us. And at that point was when I had decided that I wanted to start getting into acting. And as you know, someone who prides himself on work and loves being a student of things, I would go. We had a great video store near where we lived, and I would go and pick my favorite actor, and I would rent every movie he was in, he or she was in. And so, you know, when you're watching Cat on a Hot Tin Roof and Cool Hand Luke and all of these great Paul Newman movies, or even The Graduate and all of these phenomenal Dustin Hoffman movies, like you're pulling from all this, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, all of this stuff is so cool, and like, why am I seeing such a through line here of all of the same kinds of clothes? And that's what really started to slip into like the ether of like the, you know, the subconsciousness of like starting. That's when it all started to like percolate in, and the real like data intake started happening.
It's all about the movies.
It's all the movies.
Yeah.
I mean, so like it sounds like there you like to dive into stuff. So was that when it like you were like, oh, I'm gonna go into like deep into vintage, or was there a time when you tried to do like modern stuff first, like Spencer and I did before we started to collect vintage?
I think for me, because at that point in my life, right, like we had no money, so modern stuff wasn't an option, and this was pre-Grailed. So at least when Grailed came about, I could fuck around with some modern stuff, some like, you know, Japanese Americana, stuff like that. And I definitely went heavy into that once I started having money and Grailed was around. But certainly in those beginning stages, it was like, you know, Will and I were living in Palm Desert. So you got like Angel View Thrift and like Goodwill and shit like that. And it was like, you know, go to the Army surplus store and go get a pair of 501s, and then try to find some like old Brooks Brothers shirting at the Goodwill or at Angel View, just at the thrift, and try to piece together some stuff there. But yeah, I definitely didn't have the accessibility to be playing around with the modern stuff, at least for a few years. But yeah, in the beginning, it was all vintage.
That's something that I've always thought is weird about like people who are really into the Americana look, but only buy, like, you know, the Reddit raw denim guys who like get like, you know, the like who like buy a new pair of jeans every month, so they always have like incredibly like stiff like dark jeans and like, you know, a dark shirt and like a sawtooth or whatever. And I always see this and like they're talking about, it's like, oh yeah, I'm so inspired by all these like, you know, by like, you know, Marlon Brando or James Dean or whatever. And you look at stuff from back then, it's like no one's shit looked like new and like clean like that. I always wonder, it's like, do you look at yourself and then look at them and really think it's like, yeah, this is the same? I just don't get it.
I don't know why people do that, man. Like I just don't understand. They have like no self-awareness.
I think people in general are just too precious with their things. Like, the reason those pants look so great or that chambray shirt looks so great is because, you know, dudes were wearing it. Like, they were wearing their clothes hard and washing them consistently. And like that whole phase that APC really rotted out of like, never wash your jeans and then go to the beach and sit in the sand. And just like that was such crap for jeans. Like, it was destroying people's denim, and you're getting constant crotch blowouts, and like, you know, it was just absolutely terrible advice. But that was the problem, was like, guys are holding out and you know, you're so stressed about wanting to get the perfect fade. And then you just forget that like the only way you're going to get a good fade is by wearing it. And so then you end up not wearing anything because you're so afraid, and you get analysis paralysis, and then you're frozen, and then everything just looks stiff and uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But
so you didn't have that phase at all?
I mean, not that phase. No, like I definitely had an APC phase. Like, you know, when I was like 21, maybe 20 or 21 was the first time I went into like Crossroads and Wasteland, because I had like a very, you know, my mom is hip and my aunt, her sister is very hip. And like, you know, my aunt lived in Silver Lake, and there was a Crossroads in the early days of Crossroads, like right down the street from them. And Wasteland was obviously down on Melrose, and she would take me to the vintage stores and go to Melrose and Crossroads and shit. And like, when you don't have money, you really cannot afford to look at like full-blown aesthetics of clothing. Like, you really got to factor in utility more. And so to me, like, when I'm looking at this shit and I'm like, I'm watching these movies, like for me, the big ones were like Marathon Man and The Graduate. And I was like, okay, how can I look as great as this is? And like, yeah, it's over just a short period of time, but like, I don't have the money to make a wardrobe last forever. So like, I need a wardrobe for, you know, 3 days in the life of a movie that I can get away with for 3 years. So it was like, I got this great pair of APCs back in the day when they did pre-new standard. They used to do like a proper 12-inch rise, like 11 and a half, 12-inch rise, and a fucking like full cut 11-inch hem, hem opening, nice. Leg opening. It was like such a big jean.
I'm glad that those are finally coming back with like jean companies. Like the raw denim companies are always like a couple of years behind for some reason, but they're finally making the big jeans again.
Yeah, but like that pair, I never was like, oh, I'm never gonna wash my jeans, because I just treated them like I always did, and I wore them and then washed them, and I wore them and washed them, and they wound up looking amazing. So, the first pair I had definitely shrunk too much, but that was the Levi shrink to fit that I had got from Macy's on sale for like $20 or something, and that pair I threw in the wash, and that was like the learning lesson. Like, oh, okay, with raw denim you can't wash it with hot water and throw it in the dryer. It's gonna shrink down to be like Baby Gap. So, but yeah, it was, it was a lot of just sticking to classic American pieces that were mostly all vintage or certainly at secondhand at minimum. And, gray hoodie, I had Chucks or Jack Purcells always, and didn't have boots. I couldn't afford them back then. The APC jeans, and then like, some white t-shirts that I remember reading Aaron Levine's 10 Essentials, and I used to keep that GQ issue like under my fucking bed. And when we first became internet friends, we like talked about that. And I would keep that shit under my bed. And he was like, yeah, I love raw denim and like this shawl cardigan that they were doing at Club Monaco. And I like fucking saved up money and went and bought that goddamn shawl cardigan.
Wow.
And he was like, and I wear Fruit of the Loom V-necks that I get like a 6-pack. And I was like, I'm going to go buy some Fruit of the Loom V-necks from like Target. And I went and bought some, and like, I like hand sewed. It was the first time I ever sewed anything. Like my mom had taught me how, but I like hand sewed in the armholes to like be a little more narrow, because they just fit awfully right out of the pack. But it was stuff like that. That was definitely the early days of clothing for me.
So when I met you, now you're wearing like Levi's Stay Prests and OCBDs. How did you get to that stage?
So that transition, I think, is just like anything, right? Like you just start to go deeper down the rabbit hole, and like, know better, do better. It's the same applies to everything. Like when you know more, you can start to have a more of a discerning eye. Like in the beginning, you don't know enough, right? Like you just see it on a picture on Pinterest, or you see it in a movie, and you're just like, oh, I want that. And then the internet's a beautiful place to start learning, and you can start researching stuff, and you can go down that rabbit hole really quick. And just like I did with film and, trying to be a P-log, a historian of all of this shit, like you start to go down that rabbit hole, and it's like, oh, okay, well, if the OCBDs today don't look the same as they did back when Paul Newman was wearing it, well, Paul Newman was in these movies in the 60s and 70s, so I better go try to find some from the 60s and 70s, because that's the only way I'm literally going to get the exact same fucking look. And so that's what I was doing. And, when I'm working then at that point, I'm working professionally as an actor, and I'm making, some scratch for like the first time in my life. And, you're making some money, you can afford to buy some nice things. So, I remember like the first expensive thing I ever bought was like Mr. Freedom. I bought this jacket that I had lusted over for so long. And I love those dudes. They're still friends to this day, but like it was a horrible purchase for me. I never wore it. But then immediately it was like, oh, my money goes longer in vintage. And so it was just educating myself as best as possible and starting to find stuff and learning how best to use eBay and international auctions and things of that nature. And then accumulating the same kind of like basic utilitarian wardrobe of trying to keep a small amount of stuff that I can wear a lot with a lot of, repetition and repeatability that doesn't always feel like, oh, you're Mark Zuckerberging it up there with like a gray t-shirt and blue jeans, and like you're in the same fucking thing every day.
That's okay. So did you see your style? Like, did you start to get like bolder stuff because you were buying true vintage at that point? Or like, cause I mean, there was also that stage when you started to like really sell vintage that you kind of went full vintage seller core, like you're wearing M43 or even the monkey pants all the time with, and your, like faded hoodies and everything, which is a lot different than when I first met you, right? Like you went that way.
I mean, something that you brought up is also that, like, that you feel like you had to really start diving in. So I think to go along with that, like, yeah, when did you start diving into just like, you know, I don't know, like getting into clothing in person? Because I feel like the internet can be great, but it's really hard to get true knowledge and true experience unless you're actually handling it and seeing it in person.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we have such a luxury here living in LA where there's, you know, terrific flea markets every weekend, right? Like, you know, the schedule, like Melrose, especially back then, like Melrose was popping off. Like now it's absolute garbage, you know, for the most part. But like back then it was unbelievable, man. Like the stuff that you could find there was crazy. You could find N1s and, you know, 1950, you know, Korean War chinos, World War II chinos, like nothing. Every booth had them back then. And so, you know, Melrose was every weekend, PCC, Rose Bowl, Long Beach, Santa Monica. Like, you know the schedule and you're just there and you're going through it, and you got Rhodium during the week and things of that nature and other, you know, smaller little ones. And that would definitely have been the first time that I was, you know, handling it in person and being able to, at least with the qualifier that like, right, because, you know, I'd handled it in person at vintage stores and things of that nature before back then, but that was the first time that you're face to face with people who are selling this and have been around the block and know what they're doing, and you can ask them questions. And, you know, I always found that a lot of people complain that people in the vintage game are really big gatekeepers, but I think that that was never, certainly at least my experience. I think that maybe because I came from a real earnestness and a real like appreciation for the game and for the clothes, and I was asking questions more than I was ever trying to like tell people shit, because I didn't know anything, right? So I came at it humbly and like just wanting to know stuff. And I got lucky that I met a few people that have been doing this for a long time that really kind of took me under their wing and taught me so much invaluable knowledge, and would go out of their way to take me picking with them and take me to rag mills or flea markets and teach me stuff, how to date things, what to look for, stitch per inch, what zippers, how to date the zippers, how to do like all of that sorts of stuff. And so really, I would say around, you know, shortly before I met you guys was when all of that had really started to transpire in terms of my like really deep diving into the knowledge and history of how to understand these clothing. But then Ethan, going back to what you were asking about, when did it shift over to like what now we would call like, right, like vintage, you know, vintage dealer core. Like you look like you sell clothes at the Rose Bowl, right? Like, I think that as someone who has always had to have a lot of side hustles because of various jobs that I've ever had to have, putting myself, you know, through UCLA, you know, with 2 jobs and one of them primarily being reselling Supreme, like, right, you can't walk into Supreme and be taken seriously, at least, or sell Supreme, excuse me, and be taken seriously in Stay Pressed and some penny loafers. Maybe nowadays, you know, after Brandon took over and all of that, nowadays it's pretty swaggy. Like back then, dude, if you weren't in like skin tight Acne Studios, the ones Kanye was wearing, and like some like, you know, I used to wear this like Supreme hockey jersey all the time, just like because I had that shit because I was selling it, and so I had to like play. I'm just playing a role. And then when I was really getting into vintage was when it was like, okay, hold up, there's a market here for this. And like, I can make some money doing this on the side. And I've learned a lot. And now what a great way, you know, you have so much free time. If you're lucky enough to make a living as an actor, you have so much free time, and like nothing is worse than sitting on idle hands and just like waiting for the phone to ring. And so I was just always out and always trying to do shit. And to me, it was never like wanting to go be Mr. Actor. Cause like, to be perfectly honest, like I don't really, you know, I don't really fuck with a lot of actors. Like just because I think you get really tunnel visioned in that world, and it's really narrow minded. Like I was really, I found a home with people that were in the vintage community, and all of a sudden I'm like, okay, wait a minute. There's a real market for this kind of shit that I kind of caught the wind of before it blew up. And I figured, hey, I'm going to do the same thing I did with Supreme, right? Like I'm going to dress the part if I'm going to sell the stuff. And so all the ivy went to the back of the closet, and I started buying this stuff that like, not only was I trying to dress a certain way to be able to sell to a certain person, but also like, man, I fucking love that stuff. Like, you guys know, I still wear the hell out of those monkey pants. Like, if you follow me on any of my socials, like you see those pants constantly. Like I still have, you know, a small, granted it's much smaller these days, but like I still have my small archive of 1940s and 50s Levi's stuff that I'll never get rid of, that I wear, that I love. Because like, why have it if you're not going to wear it? I'm never just going to keep shit like in bags and
Right.
under my bed or in my closet. Like I have that stuff and I wear it, and I still have some great hoodies. But yeah, there was definitely a part of it that like also, you know, I had gotten out of a relationship, and I was definitely like, there's certainly a part that like if I'm being my most honest self, right? Like I was looking for a place to fit in, and I really found it with like these group of like people that were so fucking kind and so generous with their time and their knowledge and their resources. And like, yeah, I think like amalgamation theory, right? Like you become an amalgamation of the 5 people you hold closest to you. And I think that's the same applies with dressing. Like you're going to start to dress more like herd mentality. You're going to start to dress more like those people. And I'm so fortunate for that.
I'd believe you, but I don't think people wear ties around me. I still think I'm the only one, unfortunately.
I mean, I don't know. I feel like everything else besides the ties.
Sure, whatever. I'm
Yeah.
I'm on the side of Big Tie, the Big Tie lobby, and I would love it. I mean, hey, we were just
BTL.
talking in the Discord that even Drake is scaling back its tie production, I think, or we're just noticing that they're
man,
not.
The tie
well,
company is scaling back their ties.
I mean,
They're
they
not a
also
tie
are
company
selling all
anymore.
of their. Yeah, they're not. Okay, but let's. I do want to talk a little bit about like you turn 30 now, right? You got to be a big boy, you got to be an adult, and because now I feel like yeah, you're wearing some of the Ivy and Jason stuff that I saw you in before, but then there's a whole bunch of like more designery aspects to it, or getting these like minimal, I guess kind of basics, I guess, but like there's a new take that I see from you now that maybe some people haven't seen, but because I've seen you go from wearing short sleeve OCBD. I mean, there's when we went to that like I don't know what event that was, but you were wearing like an Aloha shirt with pleated trousers and like a flat cap, and then next thing we know, next time we see you at trivia, you're wearing like fucking hoodies and HBTs, and then now you're wearing like La Mer and these like chunky sunglasses. So like what about this new phase?
New
Tell
Doug.
us- New Doug.
What is this, Doug like 5.0 now?
There you
go.
Like chrome hearts, minimal utility, poor kid,
Yeah.
Ivy, vintage. Now, no, I think that look, like I said, I find the expression of it all wonderful. And I think that when you have some money and you can play around and afford it, it's terrific, man. And like, I think that, I'm doing myself a disservice if I leave out the serious note that like, I try to look at everything I'm ever buying as I never want to buy liabilities. I'm always trying to buy securities or investments. And when I was buying vintage, the specific, 1940s to 1960s Americana sportswear, denim, militaria, all of that, especially at the time when I was buying it, dude, I was just buying nothing but investments. And so I was looking at my wardrobe like, yeah, I can shell out $300 for a pair of Big E's. But in 6 months, if I don't want them anymore, I'll sell them for $850, $750. Like all day, I was just turning money, like making so much money on my wardrobe in a way that like you can't do unless if you're in, archival designer like RAF and shit like that. Like if you're not in that world, like I caught that window of like, oh, I can make money on the clothes that I'm buying, and that way, if I want to change, I'm never going to lose money selling something. Which when you don't come from money, you think about shit like that, right? And so, to get back to where all this comes from, right? So I'm single, I'm heavy into vintage, right? I'm popping up at the Rose Bowl on occasion, with my duffel and selling just like, I have a few Japanese clients that I would sell to, very high-end customers. And, I'd be a few grand in like 20 minutes walking around, and I'd be like, great, I made my day, I'm good. And then it just be like time to go shop. And when you're shopping at the Rose Bowl, especially back then, you were buying that kind of stuff. And then I'm dating a new girl, my current girlfriend. We're still together, Sadie. And, Sadie is very close with her family. And her grandma would turn a little bit of a side eye to me. She's a very classic old lady. And she would turn a side eye to me at times when I'd show up in these fucking tattered ass hoodies that like I thought were so cool. And like, she just didn't understand. And like, I get it. Yeah. I wouldn't understand that shit either. I'd be like, honey, why does your boyfriend look like he's homeless? Is that like a derelict? Is this a thing? I thought this was just Zoolander shit. Right. And so like, there was a few intersections. I never like to look like everybody else that's around me. I find that once that starts to happen is when it's time for me to shift it up a little bit. And the obvious second notion of that like, oh, hey, I've got a girlfriend now. I'm on, like you said, I'm on the other side of 30. It's time I start dressing a little more like a man in my 30s. Not that that means anything to, it doesn't have to mean anything to anybody, but to me, it meant something. And I wanted to look a certain way. I wanted to be taken a little more seriously. I wanted to look a little bit more presentable and approachable. And I feel like, what really drew me to Ivy in the beginning was this idea that like, I felt like a real spiritual call to this like rebelness that I felt like Ivy presented itself in Southern California, where like when everyone is wearing, some version of blue jeans and a graphic tee or athleisure or like flip flops because they're just leaving the beach. Like I felt like dressing up in like an Oxford and like a great pair of chinos was like, yo, I'm being like counterculture here, even though like I'm buttoning up, like, yo, motherfucker, like I'm counterculture AF in this. And there was definitely like a part of me that was like getting called back to that like, pre the ALD lookbooks and pre all that shit, it was like, hey, wait a minute. Like, I was taking notes from you guys. Like I was looking at you guys and like seeing like, okay, you can make a sport coat look cool. And like how you said that I was able to do that for you, Spence, like you were doing that shit for me. Like you and Ethan both were. Like, I'll tip my cap all day to you guys on that. Like I was looking at suiting and tailoring all of a sudden, like classic menswear for the first time, being like, oh, this actually looks pretty cool. Let me look into this a little bit. And then I start researching it and doing a little bit of, information digging and stuff. And I started selling off my vintage. And like I said, I've kept a lot, but I certainly sold a lot. And then it started getting back to, okay, I have a budget that I'm going to set for myself. And I want to go back to when I always felt the best about my wardrobe were those early days when I had no fucking money. That was like when I had the most fun getting dressed because I didn't have the luxury of a giant closet. And so I found that like, while for some people you get like Ethan, we always talk about this, like there's so much creativity for you within the infinite. Like you have endless sea of opportunity. And for me, I get fucking analysis paralysis. Like if I'm shopping for peanut butter and go to like a market and there's 30 different peanut butters. And then I just like pull out my phone and I'm like, what's the best peanut butter? And I'm like looking up stupid reviews that like don't matter. And I end up leaving with no peanut butter. And I found that when I was having the most fun was coloring within the box of like making a box for myself and how many different ways can I find creativity within the bounded. And I went back to that idea of like, yo, when I had the most fun, it was on this trip to Seattle for a family reunion. And I could only bring this one small suitcase. And in it, I had my those APC blue jeans, a gray Champion hoodie from the 90s, 2 white tees, 1 black tee, a thermal, a vintage Oxford shirt, and a vintage, military shirt from the 50s with the epaulets and the 2 flak pockets, a tan one, and a navy cashmere sweater, a black cable knit cashmere sweater that I had got. It was Ralph Lauren that I'd got at TJ Maxx for $5 way back in the day because it had a couple holes in it that my mom taught me how to darn. And like, that was it. And a pair of Chucks. And I was like, how many different ways can I combine this? Like, how many different ways can I do this? And I thought, you know what if I could do that same thing, bring that same energy about and do that same kind of thing with a wardrobe where now I can afford a little bit better stuff. And like, what if I could buy the best version of everything that I covet, not sacrifice in quality? And that doesn't have to mean the most expensive, right? Like I stand by that. I think 501s are the best jeans, and you can get 501s at any price point. You can go to the Goodwill and find them for $3. You can buy Japanese reproduction 501s in a very specific year and hand sewn from like Connor's Sewing Factory for, $400. So it's a price point that meets every kind of need and every kind of budget, but I love. And so that was the idea for me, was like, how can I get into this idea of really minimizing everything down to what I would just call like classics. Like I don't refer to them as basics, because to me it's like the classics. It's like the foundation of a house. Like until you understand how the right pair of blue jeans and the right t-shirt where the shoulder seam hits on your shoulder, where your shoulder meets your bicep, the length of the sleeve down your bicep, where all of those little details and nuances are the most flattering on you. Do you need a reinforced collar, non-reinforced collar? All of those little details how they fit and suit you the best to make you feel the most confident. You can't start to play everywhere else. And that's where it all came down to for me, was trying to really hone in on all of those little things.
Yeah, because I was going to say, I do definitely see a through line between what you wore now, or what you wear now, and what you wore a couple years ago. I mean, you were talking about earlier how you still wear like your monkey pants and everything, but yeah, even when you're all, you know, when you're wearing just like, flannels with a button up and like ring jacket or something like that. Something about it, like the way everything fits, the colors, there's definitely a through line.
I'm just happy to see a double-breasted suit on more people, you know?
Yeah.
Like that's it. I mean, yeah, speaking of that, like how did tailoring come back into your style? Cuz I mean, like, you know, every time we would go to Roxy's, RIP location, not the person. Actually,
Yeah.
well, Roxy, I mean, that's the name of her grandmother, so technically
Okay.
Roxy is dead. Shout out Roxy. But every time we would go, you know, we'd always like find like, you know, the sports shirts and everything, and then I'd be over there in the sport coat section. I'm like, look at this stuff, and everyone's like, nah, I don't really need tailoring, you know. So like, when did that happen? Because like now you have a couple of ring jackets.
Yeah. I think Ethan is trying to tee himself up for a nice, like, me hit one out of the park for him here.
Yeah.
Because he knows that, like, he knows damn well that, like, my first suit was bought with Ethan at Roxy. We got a 1960s Southwick 3-piece.
That's right.
That for me, I was, you know, I had watched Bullet. I'd gone, they were playing it at New Beverly.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, baby, I need that Bullet 3-piece. And I looked up, I did a deep dive. It was like, his was Southwick. And I was like, great, that's what I'm looking for. And we went to Roxy's, and boom, I found this incredible, you know, charcoal wool, really lightweight 3-piece suit in beautiful condition.
Yeah.
You know, and bless her, Roxy is so sweet, and she loved you guys so much. And she always hooked it up for you guys.
Yeah.
And as a result, that meant she hooked it up for, you know, me and the rest of the gang. And yeah, it was a lot of, there's this great photo that we have of Ethan pinching the suit in the back for me. And I was wearing a bandana at the time. So I look like Prison Mike in that episode of The Office. Because I'm
That's
wearing
right.
this like full skull cap bandana, which is hilarious that now that's like a TikTok For You page thing that kids are doing, which is so funny to me. Because I only did it because I have crazy curly hair typically. And like I was doing that to try to flatten it out a little bit.
Yeah.
But I had this skull cap bandana on and this Southwick suit. And Ethan was trying to show me, you know, how it would look after we got it tailored. And yeah, that was like step one. And then we went back and I bought this Brooks Brothers. I still have that suit. Doesn't really fit me anymore, but I bought a Brooks Brothers sack jacket there on the closing, the, like, you know, Roxy closing down the warehouse. RIP to that beautiful spot.
Yeah.
That sport coat has been passed on to someone else. And then, you know, Ethan, again, like the first trip back into ring jacket, like I shouldn't say back into, like the first foray into ring jacket was, you know, going to Pasadena, RIP the Bloke, and going to the Bloke back when they were doing I think it was their closing down sale. And those guys were so sweet. Again, just more guys that just love you guys, because you guys are really like the heart and soul of like classic menswear in LA. And you guys like keep that shit going because people feed off of, like, people see how passionate you guys are about it, and they really love and appreciate that. And so we went over there, and I was, you know, at the time, that's when I was starting to like leave a lot of the ratty sweats behind, but still keep my, you know, my 50s Levi's and old chambrays and stuff. And I was looking for a sport coat that, you know, I could entry my way into the world of tailoring that made sense. And I got that tweed. I laugh because I've literally never worn it. I told Ethan the other day, like, I bought it. I spent so much money on the sport coat, and it literally has sat in the garment bag since the day I got it back from the tailor. But, you know, that's the mistakes you make when you're buying your first sport coat and you live in Southern California.
I feel like I told you not to get tweed, but I was like,
Yeah, tweed is tough.
You did tell me, but I was very hesitant and resistant to your smart advice at the time. And I was like, no, you don't know. I'm looking for this, like, you know, Ralph Lauren English meets American, you know, classic chic moment that's like very country. But the problem with that, right, is like that whole aesthetic is very, you know, northeast of the United States, and it's a much different climate over
Yeah,
there.
I'm checking the weather right now. All next week it's going to be in the 90s again, so get ready for that.
I'll bust that tweet out, baby.
There
Yeah.
you go. Which is really funny because I got a brown plaid balloon jacket on eBay, and then recently a friend of mine in New York also found one on eBay, or like maybe like grailed or something. And so I'm like, just you should have held out, man. You could have gotten balloon, which is the superior fabric and actually is wearable in Southern California.
Yeah.
But yeah, so now you have, I mean, you had the blazer, right? Then you have the flannel suit, and then you have like the brown suit now as well.
I do, but those are in my closet. Then in the guest closet, we have the entire foray that I did into ring jacket, where I went like ham on ring jacket over the pandemic, and I bought I must have 5 sport coats, all various like check plaids and like much lighter fabrics that I was wearing the crap out of over the pandemic, right? Because it was like, that's when ALD really popped off with that look that I loved in the very beginning, was like, sweatpants. Everyone was in a very comfy aesthetic. And so it was like sweatpants and loafers, or my wallabies and a t-shirt and a cashmere sweater tied around my waist and a sport coat, like a big slouchy breezy sport coat, and like a dad cap, or like an old, 1980s, like, my brother got me a great Niners hat. That's my favorite football team from the 80s. And I'd wear that religiously. And like, that was my uniform. But the whole time it's always gone back to like, what can I make my uniform and what can I get the most amount of wear out of? And then those sport coats over time, I just felt like, okay, now this look is like too saturated about the marketplace and everyone is doing this. And also the world is starting to open back up again. And I'm not going to be going out in sweatpants and a sport coat anymore. And like, that's fine when you're like going to drive in the car up, Angeles Crest, or, take the dogs on a walk, but like, I'm not going to go out in that stuff. So transitioned again. And that's when like the aforementioned trying to build out that very fine tuned wardrobe really started to happen. And like the suits that you mentioned, now the ones that I stick with are, I have the brown, it's a 3-roll too, but I got it on Essence. And,
that's right.
Shout out our buddy Kapil, who works for Ring, and he and I were laughing about it because they repressed it to just be a 3-button stance, not a 3-roll 2.
Okay.
And I kind of love it. I think it's very like 90s Prada, especially in the color and the fabric weight and the drape. And like, it's cotton wool, but it's got some definite structure to it. It doesn't have a lot of drape. And, like that color, that shade of chocolate with the 3-button, only buttoning the top button is like, it's definitely a look I like to wear it that way. But I have that one, and then the lightweight gray flannel ring jacket, double breast, and those are the 2 suits. I have a 1940s cream rayon.
Ooh.
that one's sweet, that I won't ever let leave the closet. And those are the 3 suits that I keep in my closet to wear.
I'm so proud. I love it. I love hearing about suits. So like now you got like Lemaire in there. You got your chunky black frames. What do you think like the look of Doug is right now?
The look of Doug.
And what do you think it
Put together
it says?
your Doug lookbook.
Yeah.
Put together like one of those like cutout, like those cutout things where it's like comes with like jeans and it's like a Ken doll, but like a paper.
Yeah,
Ken,
a paper doll.
Paper doll. I'll give you the paper doll lookbook. No, the chunky sunglasses was a thing that like, now they're black, but like originally it was like, I've had this pair of sunglasses. It's a Bausch and Lomb Wayfarer that they were my grandfather's, that he bought new in the 60s. And my mom stole from him when she went away to college. And then I stole from her. And it's just kind of like tradition. Like we keep them in the family, and like we all just kind of steal them. We've all stolen them from each other. So the chunky frame was like always around. Like that was always my sunglass. Okay. But the new ones tilt forward too much. So that's why I always went with the vintage ones. And it was so sentimental and I love them so much. But yeah, certainly now I don't wear I don't wear the brown sunglasses. It's all black. I definitely like, if I laid out all of my sunglasses, which I've thrown a photo on my Instagram of all of them before, it's like, yeah, I have a type. Like I have a problem. Like I have 7 pairs of sunglasses and they're all chunky black. acetate frame. Like they all look identical. It's like to most people be like, why the fuck do you need all? They're all the same pair, but to me they're all subtly different. But
Oh yeah. I mean, hey, it's like you look at my closet, I have so many light blue shirts, and it's like, no, they're all different, I'm telling you.
I'm not the meme of the old man wearing the plaid shirt, holding up the plaid shirt to his arm. I'm not that guy. It's a different plaid. Trust me.
Yeah.
One is gingham, one is baby gingham. They're
There you
different. No, like you said, there's La Mer in there. There's the Row.
The Guidi boots,
I've never.
You
Yeah,
got the-
Guidi. I got the Guidis. I got those. I have some Rick, but like I don't do the stuff. I shouldn't say I have some Rick because then people are gonna think I'm like a Sith Lord out here wearing like fucking like drop crotch diaper jeans. No, I have like a cashmere sweater and like a long sleeve undershirt from Rick that like I think are phenomenal. But I like minimal aesthetics in general. I stick to a very neutral color palette. I've always been drawn to that, to more earth tones and things. I think it, like for me, when I'm talking about, having a wardrobe that you can wear time over and be able to mix things and interchange stuff, having a lot of bright colors doesn't really work because it stands out too much, right? So I stick to brown. Like my mom always taught me, like always, she kind of like laid the foundation for me. It was always navy, camel, white, black, grays, blue jeans, army, shades of olive, drabs for military, and then like a pop of red as a color. And that's kind of the world that I've always lived within for color palette for myself. It's like a very classic palette. And I like to stick to, when I'm purchasing designer, I like to stick to designers that are definitely like, what now is deemed as like stealth luxury, like stuff where you're not going to know what it is. And I'm not really necessarily trying to pay for a brand or a big label. That's certainly not anything that I would ever want. It's more the cut that I'm after, the fabric itself, the nature of the garment. And like typically I'm buying things that are still all classic pieces. I just like to play around with the silhouettes. Like I have, 2 or 3 great Brooks Brothers cashmeres from the 60s that I love and wear so often that are enormous, right? And they're so big. And then to offset that, I got this really great Rick Owens one that's like very cropped and like quite androgynous and like stops like, you guys would love it because it's perfect if your trousers are anywhere over your navel. It's like stops right at that. And so it's great when I'm wearing pants that I need that for. And I don't want a giant sweater, if I have a big pant and I need a smaller sweater up top to kind of balance the proportion out. But yeah, it's, if I were to say, to circle back, like if I were to say like what my look is, like, I think that, I'll always be, I'll give you 2 options. Like, I think that the things that I find myself gravitating towards the most are like a great pair of 501s. I'm a big proponent of sizing way the fuck up and learning how to sew the waistband in yourself. I talk about that all the time on my Instagram. And on my TikTok, a few TikTok videos that I've made talk about that. And so I have like, tagged 38s and I'm like a 32 and a half true waist. So I'm taking in 2 inches on each side, but it gives me a leg that's a little fuller, that has a little more space and drape to it, that doesn't, fit me so snug through the leg. So a great pair of 501s, a nice white tee, a cashmere sweater, and a great pair of loafers with, an Oliver Peoples sunglass and my Cartier step tank from the 70s. And that's kind of like one very standard Doug that's like in the bag of tricks of like, what the fuck do I want to wear today? I don't want to think, oh great, I'll just throw that on. And like if it's too hot, the sweater will go around the waist. And if it's or it'll go over the shoulders. But like I love having that sweater to kind of break up what would otherwise just be just a t-shirt and jeans, right? And then the other one is like, I always looked at black trousers as like, oh, the cool kids are always in like some kind of black trouser, right?
Right.
The kind of like the kids that like the people that like, friends of mine that are, they work in like, they have CD positions at, at various companies, not necessarily that they're in fashion, but they're just like, they're cool motherfuckers. They're dudes that like, you look at them and it's like, oh, you've got taste, right? Like you know it, you spot it when it's easy to spot. And those guys love a black trouser And for me, that pair of recent has always been, I lusted over these ever since they put them out. It's the Row did this pant called the Antico pant. And my God, they are spicy meatball. They are so fucking expensive. But I wanted them for over a year. I saved up for them. I bought them and I wear them all the fucking time. So like cost per wear, while still high, is like I'm chipping away at that because I wear them so much. But
There you go.
they're based on an M51 snow pant, which was like an over pant that was issued to the U.S. Army in poorer climates, made out of a heavy cotton canvas that had not a drawstring, but it wasn't elasticated, but it was a corded tie that you would tie off at the leg opening, and they basically, it is a double gusseted knee, and they copied the pattern identically, but they did it in this like incredible black nylon that's just like a little techie, a little sporty, a little chic,
That's
and
really
like
cool.
yeah, that's definitely like that pant. I find I love with like my common projects b-balls, or I'll, uncinch the elasticated leg opening and wear it with my Guidis or a pair of Belgian shoes, and do that with like a t-shirt and a black sunglass and a sling bag. And like, those are kind of my two core outfits these days.
I mean, what's really cool is that it seems even more unique now after having known you. I feel like it's a cool mix, especially when you start looking at like, I don't think we have time to go into your interior design stuff, but like a mix of like, not eclectic, but like old and new kind of designs coming together. I feel like your style now reflects that a lot, which has been really cool. And yeah, I mean, kudos to you on that.
Kudos to you. Yeah, it's always good when like to have both. I think an overall appreciation of aesthetics, because we've talked about on the podcast, there are like vintage suit guys that we know that like will look great in vintage suits, but as soon as they try to wear anything else, they look like shit. Or there's a lot of like cool like clothes guys we know, or artists or whatever, that I don't know, just live in shitholes. So it's nice to, I don't know, I feel like you should have you should have an appreciation of all aesthetic arts if you want to truly be into this.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, like I said, like it all kind of folds in on each other. Like, the more I learn about my favorite interior, my favorite fabricators of pieces of furniture and things, or architects, or, painters, the more it informs my tastes and all of that. But like having that foundation of vintage clothing certainly like meant the world for me. And now being able to like, I appreciate that compliment so much from you guys, that like, it's that balance of kind of all of my interests all coming together in unison and harmony. It's like, take that pant from the Row, for example. Like I can look at that pant and see so specifically the minute they teased it online, like, oh, you guys are doing an M51 snow pant, and I'm so fucking here for it. Like, it's so sick. You guys just did like just enough of a twist on it to make it so cool and so modern and so chic, but no one will get it. Like everybody else, just like they look at it and it's like, oh, it's this cool techie pant, but like no one sees the reference that it's pulling from, right? And like, I look at Le Maire and it's like, oh yeah, you're doing an N1 lining in a vest, right? Like you're doing the tanker vest. Like this last season, he did like an alpaca lined like vest. That's like, oh, you're doing a World War II tanker vest, and it's like, this is incredible. And it's like, having that knowledge gives me such an appreciation for the things that designers that I appreciate. Because certainly I'm no fashion head. Like I pay attention. I know a little bit. I don't know as much as a lot of people, certainly. And I ask a lot of questions to those that always know more than me. But like, I always go back to that. Like I like clothes. I don't like fashion. Like I can appreciate fashion, but that's art to me. And I like clothes. I like the utility of wearing clothes, and people that wear clothes every day. I get more inspiration from that than I do from fashion designers. But being able to see where fashion designers are pulling from for their fashion and for their stuff that's going to be on the runway, and knowing that like, oh yeah, you guys are pulling from the same place that I was buying from back in the day, and all of those same references. It's so cool. Like that's such a,
yeah. I think that, yeah, knowledge of like, even if you're not into buying vintage, knowledge of clothing history is really good for stuff like that, because I mean that's one of the reasons I think Ethan and I were good at replicating like the Drake's look or the Bryceland's look or whatever with vintage, because we could be like, okay, I see what they're doing here. Let me just buy the original, which is like $70 on eBay.
100%. Yeah.
I mean, that's why I don't really own a lot of Drake's ties when you own, the original 40s ties, or at least, the Polo Ralph Lauren ties that I guess Drake's is kind of going after too. But Polo RL took the 40s ties. That's what they did.
Yeah, he was always trying to that white tie, right? Like that's how it started.
Yeah. So you're in this Doug right now.
You're in this Doug.
You see yourself,
Doug.
you see yourself changing any further? I mean, like you said, you're doing TikTok and IG stuff. Do you think that might have an effect on the next, if there is a next phase for your style?
I think that certainly already did, in so much as that, like, I've always, I've always liked Rick Owens. I've always had an appreciation. I love when people can just like I think you were talking about it, Spence, just a second ago, like someone who can, if I can segue for a moment, like someone who can, like, you look amazing in like vintage suits, but then you try on something else and it doesn't work. Like, dude, if you rock that like Sith Lord Rick Owens drop crotch, a bunch of fucking black and layers out the ass, like if you rock that and it looks great on you, like it is sick. And I love that. I love that for you though, very specifically. Like I love that for you and not for me. I know where my lane is and I stay in my lane, but like certainly being exposed to that made me look and be like, oh yeah, why don't I go to the Rick store and like go see if there's anything here for me that I probably never would have 6 months to a year ago, and picked out a sweater that I fucking love. Does that mean everything's going to change? No, because like I look at it like a race car, right? Like I look at it like, I'll use golf as a better metaphor. Like it's easy to take someone in golf who's shooting in the hundreds to get them to shoot in like the 80s. You can do that in like a couple weeks. But to get someone who's shooting a few over par, like 5-6 over par, to around a scratch golfer around even par, that's a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of dedication. And you're really fine tuning. It's like a race car. Like you're trying to shave off milliseconds, right? Like that's all you're doing at that point. And so for me in my wardrobe where it is now, I don't really see it changing much. I see maybe, it's a refinement at this point of anything. It's, this thing that I have isn't the version of it. Now there's a version of it that I know about that I would rather replace it with. And so then it would be selling or offloading that current piece for something new. But the core pieces, those classics that it's all built on, that's all going to stay there.
Now, can you talk a little bit about? Oh, I'm sorry, Spencer. Go ahead and ask a question.
Well, I think maybe if we want to do some rapid fire questions at the end, I can save mine for then.
Okay. I mean, I was going to ask you. I mean, Doug, what exactly do you want to get out of TikTok and IG Reels? Like that's you talk about like, I guess hustling right as you're acting. You're not selling the vintage right now. Now I feel like you're putting some effort into this avenue. Like what inspired that, and what do you want to get out of it?
I think that for me, it all came back to like this real appreciation that I had and this gratitude that I felt for the people that really helped me out when I started getting into this and my quest for learning more. There was a lot of really like wonderfully lovely people, shout out Max. He's at Sanforized on Instagram. He's a really good friend. Jamie, she's Raggedy Threads and Orange Pancakes. That's her store, Raggedy Threads, in Brooklyn and down here in Little Tokyo. And like, those were my, like, I had a lot of really special people that were able to teach me a lot. And there was never any gatekeeping, and it was all just like open source. What I know, I'll teach you and I'll help you. And I felt like, you know what? I learned a lot and I wanted to give it back. Like I'm a millennial, right? But like one thing that I fucking love about Gen Z is like the complete disdain for gatekeeping shit. Like I love that. I love that just like, yo, there's enough room under the sun and enough shit on eBay for all of us to win. So like, I don't need to gatekeep my shit. I don't need to stop you from knowing where it was. Like even when I was buying vintage and selling, and like everyone would be like, yo, oh my God, where did you get all these sweatshirts? Like, how are you getting all this? I'd be like, oh, yo, it's my girl back there. Like, go hit her up. And I was always telling everybody where I found everything. Why? Because I was never threatened. Like, I didn't care. I was like, yeah, I want everybody to eat. Like, there's enough for everybody. I'm not going to be so like so strict with it that I'm going to try to be like, because that's all just a place of fear and ego and feeling like you got to like fight and smash your bottle and like protect your land. And like, that wasn't it for me. Like, that's not what I came up in. And that's certainly not what I was ever trying to do. And so I think, what do I want out of that? I just want to help people, man. Like, if I can do that in any way, like the sweetest compliments to me are when like someone goes out of their way to send me a DM and be like, yo, I loved that outfit that you did. And like, I wore the same thing. Like, yo, I bought a pair of loafers, I bought a pair of Aldens because of you. Or like, I see it in friends and the influence of people that I've had. And like, I love that, man. Like, it's so flattering to me whenever anybody is like, yo, I fuck with what you're doing, because I fuck with it, but like, I'm just always so flattered when anybody else does. And like, that's all I wanted from this stuff was like, I know a lot. I'm not going to like faux humble myself here and pretend like I don't. Like, I know a lot of shit. And I think as a result of that, like, people have seen that and recognized that. And it was about just wanting to give back, like help out some younger kids that like, maybe some kids are in the same position I was in. Don't have a lot of disposable income and you want to know how to dress well. And like, yo, if I could help that kid out, like that'd be the fucking coolest thing ever.
Little, I guess not little, that's Big Brother Doug right there. Big Brother Doug.
Yeah.
All the IG.
I like the noises that you're making right there.
Yeah. Like, be a little bit of a big brother. Like that's a role I've had my whole life, right? Like teach you how to be a little cooler, a little chicer, help you understand like, yeah, you might be into this today, but let me show you where that's going to lead you in 5 years and kind of expedite the process for you.
Probably the best way. Yeah, the best way that you could use TikTok.
I mean, hey, we try that all the time. We say, hey, if you could skip the 5 years or whatever of old Ethan, that's what we've canonized the name of. It's great. But sometimes people don't want to listen, and that's okay too. They'll do it and they'll go through it.
They'll do it.
They'll look back and cringe just like we do.
Yeah, but like look at me, like even take us for example, right? Like as a result of your guys' knowledge about tailoring and classic menswear, I was able to like expedite my process, right? Like I didn't step out and go like, yo, let me go to Banana Republic and go get a suit. Like, yeah, I mean that's certainly not my I'm not, no shade to anybody where that's what you can afford, but like that's not my personality ever to just like aim for the middle. Like I'm always going to try to just get like what's the best version of everything. But like certainly it was because of you guys that I knew about Ring Jacket and was able to be like, oh, I can just like expedite the process. Like learn it a little quicker here with some pace.
Yeah. And on that note, I mean, Spencer and I have talked about this before. Banana Republic or J. Crew suits are expensive. They're like $800. Yeah. Like that's still.
I don't understand.
It's like, okay, the most expensive when I was working there, the prices might have gone up. The most expensive suit we sold was like $1,200, and every time I sold that one, I was like, why would you buy this and not buy like a ready or like a custom made suit for like roughly the same price or like a couple $100 more.
Yeah. See, so it's. People don't have that.
Mm-hmm.
I think I always think of J. Crew and Banana as like, two brands where like sales are so integral to their business model that like
there you go.
I'm always thinking of it as like, yeah, it's like you're priced high because you have to know that you're going to knock 60% of it off at some point, and it will be at the outlet. And as someone who grew up shopping at outlet malls and shit, like when I'm saying Banana and like if that's all you can afford, it's because my head's going to like Banana 80% off at the outlet.
Oh, absolutely.
Suit for like $110.
I mean, in one of our group chats, like a guy was like, "Oh, I got these like," but I mean, Banana Republic seems to be doing better now. Just like J. Crew's having a little thing, and we don't have time to go into that right now. But there were like these pleated side tab chinos from like the Banana Republic Heritage Collection, and the guy was like, "Oh, I caught them for $20." And I clicked on it. I want to see what they looked like, and the original price was like $150. And I'm like, okay, yeah, like, yeah, I get it. Like when I think of what you can afford, that's the price. Not, but like there are people who buy it like retail and then they defend it, and I'm like, dude, $150, dude. None like outside. My custom made pants were $150. Like that's So maybe that's a little too cheap too. But yeah, I think we can move on to some rapid fire stuff as we close out, Spencer. So why don't you open fire?
I wanted to know, was there anything that you sold that you like really regret? Like anything that you were like, oh, I'm never gonna wear this again, but now you're like, fuck, I never should have sold that.
100%. There's so many, but like the two that I'll give you the fastest are 1985 Chicago Jordan 1s that I sold like maybe like 2 years too early, because I sold 94s like 6 months before the blow up, but I sold the 85s a couple years before. Like right, yeah. And the point I'm talking about is like the when the Michael Jordan documentary came out, everything after that, the market for those just completely skyrocketed, and I missed the window on both. But I would have loved to have had the 85s just to keep forever. And my, it's not really a regret. I regret selling it because it was one of the best Type 2s I've ever found. But what was at the time my personal Type 2 I sold. But it was always just too small. So that's why I say I can't really regret it that much.
Yeah, that's always tough.
What else you got, Spencer?
I don't know. Do you have any questions? It was like the only rapid fire question I had.
It's like the rapid fire, boys.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta be honest. You were like a great interview because I don't know. We didn't have to ask.
Thanks for keeping track of the entirety of my question. That's a big one.
I always like when I'm interviewing someone and they can just talk without much prompting from me.
Yeah.
So you know what? I mean, that was great.
I mean, yeah. I mean, you kind of answered. I thought we would get into a little bit more, but I think we've kind of covered the uniform a lot. And,
maybe there will be a part 2. Maybe you'll come on the Twitch or something. We can do a. I
mean, hey, Chomsky was on twice. Maybe there'll be a second thing more about discussing the merits of a uniform, because I think something that I was gonna share in the moment, but of course he had some other great points that we decided to tackle. But your point about being in the box, I was like, I think I'm in a box. My box is just bigger and has more stuff. I could even though I can appreciate Rick Owens, I probably would never buy anything from there. I don't have any draw to it,
Yeah, but you don't know about the sweater.
Yeah, I mean, there you go. See,
I mean, I don't think I wouldn't call myself a minimalist dresser, but I do definitely appreciate now more. I'm more okay with I don't have a bunch of patterns going on. That's fine and stuff like that.
Well, that happens. You wear the ties. It's easier if you don't do that.
Yeah, but before I was like, how do I make this outfit more interesting? It's I can't. But now I'm fine with wearing chambray shirts or even blue OCBDs, which look exactly like chambray shirts.
Yeah, exactly.
Every day and stuff like that.
As
and
someone who has the Brooks Brothers button-down collar in chambray and a Brooks Brothers OCBD in blue, they are definitely different, and I do not wear them the same way. But no, yeah, I think. I mean, when Doug and I were catching up, I think for the first time in a couple of months, and where I told him you got to be on the pod before the year is over, we were saying how, I still have a uniform. It's just made up of a lot of different things. I think, I said before in the Discord, if there was a vibe, the Esquire man or the Ivy Ethan is the default, and it just happens that those things have multiple striped shirts or different foulard ties, but that doesn't really change. You don't really see me do a lot of Esquire man, but with I don't know Rick Owens or something like that. And usually it's I have those moods, you have the different Dougs, I have the different Ethans, but the biggest ones have just a lot of ties. That's it.
We talked about it that you want 40 ties, right? And in an ideal wardrobe, I'm throwing a number out. I don't remember the exact number because it's irrelevant, but it was you want a wardrobe with a bunch of ties. And for me, I want to be the person that if I'm going to wear a tie, it's going to be a black silk tie. That's it. What to expect, and that's okay. And I would be totally okay being that person because it's all relative. Your box to you is a normal size. And to me, I look at your box and I'm like, that's the biggest fucking box I've ever seen in my whole life. And you look at my box and you're like, it's a New York apartment. What are you doing? How do you even live in there? Where's your bed? You got a Murphy bed in this bitch? What's going on here?
And the crazy part is that I never have decision fatigue. The ideas keep coming. It's unstoppable. It's hard for me to stop making fits. I'm about to go to New York literally in 4 hours. I have to stop. I have to be I'm not gonna literally be here. I gotta stop making outfits because they're just gonna sit on my rack. I gotta pack what I have right now and then take that and just wear it. And I won't have my closet to look at. And it's a really weird blue ball situation of where I'm I have all these ideas, but I literally can't do anything. and they're at home, they're waiting for me, they're begging me to put them together with stuff. But that's like an Ethan, that could just be an Ethan problem. Maybe regular people don't have this, but
Blue ball situation.
Yeah, it's like a creative blue balls, you know?
Creative blue balls.
It's right there.
What's the creative equivalent of the balls? Like, what's the organ that controls your creativity?
The brain. And blue brain.
The blue brain. Yeah.
I mean, I come up with something. No, this was recent, and we'll close out right after this. But I was talking about like I don't know, talking to my friends about dating, and you know, they're talking about like, oh yeah, like when do you stop using condoms or whatever, and then there was, you know, the conversation moved to like, oh, like, you know, how do you know, like, not to get too attached, or how to, you know, whatever. This is like a totally separate topic, but I was like, oh yeah, what if there were like emotional condoms to prevent you from emotionally coming? Like do you like
Jesus?
And I was like, do you think of like little like dogs or baseball to prevent yourself from like, oh, I'm about to share some traumas with this person, I don't want to get them, you know, to overshare. But I'm like, no, that's just like stopping yourself from coming. Whereas condoms, they don't stop you from coming, they just protect you from getting someone pregnant. And I was like, well, I don't even know what the pregnancy metaphor in this is. Anyway, that's my whole blue balls to condoms story right there, where the analogy doesn't always work.
Blue ball brand condoms. Do you think that's smart branding?
God, I think you got something there.
Is that smart branding, or is that just a name, Spencer? Like that could just be like,
it's just a name that people are gonna remember.
So I guess it's good. Like the condom prevents you from coming, so it's like it's a double. I mean, it gives you blue balls. It doesn't stop your erection. It just gives you blue balls. So like you can keep pleasuring whoever you want to pleasure with your penis.
So bad.
Yeah, but it'll hurt, and you just can't finish.
It'll hurt you.
You know, it's not just Viagra.
Hey, some guys are into this. And all of them listen to this podcast.
Yeah, we know this. Yeah, we knew exactly.
We know the sexual freaks love style and direction.
Yeah, S and D, more like S and M. I don't even know what that stands for. Sex and mothers. I mean, that's how I do it.
Whoa.
Anyway, thank you for joining us on the. We always find a way to bring it back. And if you guys want worse, listen to the bonus episode that came out in September.
Yeah, you got to subscribe to the Patreon for that.
It's the craziest one ever for the first 15 minutes. Anyway, Doug, thank you for popping on the podcast. Where can people find and follow you if they want to see those IG reels and TikToks?
You can call me Douglas.
On everything.
On everything.
See, that's smart branding. See, that's what the definition of smart branding is, Spencer.
Someone took my Twitter account username. Although they're just sitting on it. I might contact Twitter and see if I could get that.
So many people now that I've noticed, because I scroll through my stories to see who watches. So many people have taken the "you can call me" from my. It's not like I have like a very like I don't have like it's, you know, it's not generic enough. Like, when I see people now that do it, it's like, you can call me Cordell, you can call me Amber. And just like, oh, nice, I like that. I appreciate that. Yeah. Thanks for stealing my shit.
It's like, it's like Spartacus.
Yeah, it's cute.
Yeah, if you ever were about to be, I guess, arrested for treason, you all would just say, "You can call me Spartacus," and everyone.
Yeah.
And he can't. The law prevents him from arresting all of you. You know, that's
true.
Take that, Caesar. I guess that's what Jesus did. Anyway. Thank you guys.
What the podcast is all about.
Yeah, thank you everyone else for listening here, and you know, for those of you who support our Patreon, who get to join our Discord and listen to all the bonus episodes, and so you can if you want to do that, you can go to patreon.com/downdirection, and that's where you can give us $5 a month. But if you give us 10, that's the same benefit you guys get, but we say your name. So thank you to Austin Malott, Shane Curry, Philip Lagarde, Jarrett Colian, Henrik Wilberg, and John Clifford. We appreciate you guys a lot. I'm at Ethan M. Wong. I don't think we introduced ourselves at the top, but whatever.
No, I'm at Spencer DSO. You know who we are.
And thank you to MJ for producing the podcast. I know this one's going to be a doozy for you, but don't get on mic.
Hi.
We'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.